9 U.S. Presidents Assassinated by Globalists by Larry Engel. This is article number 11 about the assassination of the 25th President of the United States, William McKinley, by a Rothschild factor, who was mind-controlled and ran by highly skilled propagandists and chaos agents. There is a direct financial link to the Jewish community. Much in the same way that movie villains are manufactured in Hollywood, a 28-year-old young man's mind was twisted and molded to believe that President McKinley was oppressing innocent and helpless people, especially those who call themselves Jews. Before we get into the report on William McKinley's assassination, I must report to you that there's a very aggressive attempt to prevent you from hearing this video series, 9 U.S. Presidents Assassinated by Globalists, by the Jewish community. They don't want you to hear this series. This censorship first began when I reported from a Mossad source that the Jewish community joins with the Mossad in spying and espionage in the United States, and a large segment of the Jewish community conceal and do not report this spying and espionage. This came from a well-informed source within the Mossad. In this report, it said that 30% of the Jewish community will join the Mossad in spying and espionage in the United States, and the other 70% of the Jewish community will not report it and will cover it up. And I reported that these activities were unlawful. From that point on, they began to claim that I had infringed someone's copyright on some music that was jazz improvised and recorded in 1933. This should be in public domain, and there's a reason why they falsely claim to have copyrights, because they want to destroy the morale of the people, damaging their culture. You can listen to some of this music while I run some information for you on the screen. On to our report about President McKinley being assassinated. The assassin had no criminal history or history of violence. He did not drink. He was a laborer who had no job or visible source of income. As the assassin approached the president that day, quote, he was a boyish-looking fellow with an innocent face, perfectly calm. The official story describing the shooter as a lunatic and an anarchist is just totally nonsense. This is a fairy tale, and as you examine it more closely, you find that this is not true. The guy was not really a lunatic, and he wasn't even smart enough to be claiming that he was an anarchist. He probably had no idea what an anarchist was. It was just a word somebody pumped in his ear. Members of the press were not permitted to interview him, because he probably would have spread it all the way across the nation that he assassinated the president because agents of the Jewish community had provoked him. Solomon Robert Guggenheim was heir to a wealthy mining family. He founded the Yukon Gold Company in Alaska. This is very significant because America's monetary system at the time consisted of gold and silver coins. This ties also with the assassination of ex-President Benjamin Harrison and the gold mines in Venezuela. So you can see that video when I get around to making it. By controlling large stockpiles of gold and silver coins, the globalists were able to manipulate the U.S. economy. The panic that occurred in 1893 is an example of this kind of chaos that they can create. They can first create an inflation and make the economy look very, very pleasing and very stimulated, and everybody is buying stuff, but then they crash it by causing a depression by reducing the volume of gold and silver coins in circulation. And when they do that, then people lose their farms and they can't pay their bills. And so this is all a kind of a plan where they inflate it, make it look good, and then they turn right around and cause a depression, and everybody loses all their investments. And the fact that they knew when they were going to expand or decrease the volume of money in circulation gave them advantage of buying and selling at the right time. The young assassin had lived through this hardship, and he could easily be persuaded and misled to believe it was the president who was at fault. Guggenheim married Irene M. Rothschild, the daughter of Victor Henry and Josephine Wolfe Rothschild. Her father had come to the United States from Stuttgart, Germany, where the Jewish community supported themselves principally in the banking and large-scale merchandising sectors, and in the professions, mainly medicine and law, and other business adventures. Nathan Wolfe Kaula, I don't pronounce that correctly, but it's K-A-U-L-L-A, and other family members served as privy councilors. Privy councilors managed the entire Royal House Court Bank and later the Bank of Germany. Guggenheim is most famous for his art museum. However, he and others secretly funneled very large sums of money into the hands of famous Jewish persons and their projects, like newspapers, magazines, theater, and political activities. Guggenheim had studied in Switzerland, known as the historical source for globalist high finance. Two such persons who fit the political activist category were the Jewish lady Emma Goldman and the Jewish man Alexander Beckman. They were violent anarchists, propaganda professionals, and chaos agents. They had become well established in the citizens' minds, famous and recognized, powerful public figures drawing large crowds, and they were abundantly financed. That's how they achieved that success. It is hardly difficult to understand how a young, not too bright, dirt poor, uneducated man like Leon Frank Zolgos would fall under their highly skilled and practiced hypnotic influence and become an assassin. Zolgos could not grasp why anyone in the world would not believe he was a hero. He had killed the big bad man, the President of the United States. He had been sold a bill of goods and obviously was deeply mind-controlled. No one told him to kill the president. However, it was repeatedly pounded into his brain that the president was a villain who had caused many Jews to suffer. It was honorable to kill this evildoer. It was his duty. And he believed with every fiber in his mind. He said, "Her words burned in my head. That's what he said. Her words burned in my head. The words of these famous people, surrounded by so many applauding followers and made public figures in the owned press, burned in his head. Emma Goldman, who did not have U.S. citizenship, knew exactly what to say to him. They were professional. As he was being strapped into the electric chair, Zolgos blurted out, "I killed the President of the United States because he was the enemy of the good people." And he meant Jews there. "I did it for the help of the good people, the working men of all countries," he said. All countries. All countries. Does that mean globalists, world government, New World Order, League of Nations, United Nations? Is that what that means? All countries? So if they claim a lunatic said this, does this mean they are all lunatics? Oh, that's very interesting. Zolgos did not have the smarts to know the real difference between anarchy and other forms of government. It seems misleading, therefore, to say that the president was assassinated by an anarchist, when the killer doesn't even know what an anarchist is. District Attorney Thomas Penny asked, "Mr. Zolgos, have you been temperate or intemperate in your use of intoxicating liquors?" There was no reply. There was no response. "Mr. Zolgos, did you understand the question?" the district attorney asked. "No, sir, I did not." You can't really call someone who is that low in mental capacity an anarchist. You really can't do that, because he doesn't even know what anarchy is. He just does what people tell him to do. He's just a robot. So Mr. Zolgos was a very dim light. He was not very bright and easily manipulated by these expert propagandists. In Zolgos' possession at the time of his arrest was a card showing that he was a member, in good standing, in a Cleveland lodge of the Knights of the Golden Eagle. Therefore, he was a Mason. Therefore, he had taken a blood death oath, 3 of them, 3 blood death oaths of secrecy and blind obedience to a master Mason. Unknown to many, the inner circle and highest level degrees of the Masonic Lodge are inherited by Europeans along with their titles of nobility. So you can't rise to the highest level of the Masonic Lodge unless you're royal. The president was assassinated on September 6, 1901. In 1892, Alexander Berkman made an unsuccessful attempt to assassinate businessman Henry Clay Frick as an act of propaganda of the deed. Propaganda of the deed, for which he served 14 years in prison. The deed or act is supposed to induce the public to join your cause. It's a propaganda stick, a game. He denied that his propaganda partner and very close intelligence agent associate, Emma Goldman, was involved, as later would Zolgos. During interrogation, Zolgos claimed to be an anarchist and said he had been inspired to act after attending public speeches held by the Jewess Emma Goldman. "What was the motive that induced you to commit this crime?" he was asked. "I am a disciple of Emma Goldman. I killed the president because I done my duty. I did not feel that one man should have all this power while others have none. His motive for shooting the president was put into his head by the Jewess Emma Goldman, financed by Rothschild Guggenheim. His meetings with Goldman and other members of her anarchist group were held secretly and in private and carefully never made public. These anarchists were likely his main source of income, as he had no job, and it is unknown where he got the money to buy the gun, to pay his rent, to buy food, or to travel. A swarthy-looking man with a short-cropped, heavy black mustache ahead of Zolgos in the president's reception line created a diversion. That diversion attracted the attention of the president's bodyguard, who had to push this man along, leaving Zolgos an opportunity to shoot. Now, there is more direct evidence of the connection between the Guggenheim and Rothschild family and Emma Goldman and Alexander Berkman. After time had passed and they were out of the USA, their hidden secret financial support was handled more in an open and direct manner. Peggy Guggenheim, Solomon's niece, art patron, and heir to a fortune, purchased a cottage in Saint-Tropez on the Côte d'Azur in France for $5,000. And then she gave it to Emma Goldman. They called her house Good Spirit, Bon Esprit. I guess my French is horrible, so don't worry about that. There at this house, the famous chaos agent and a chaos expert could write and receive correspondence. Peggy and her Jewish community friends frequently visited the famous Jewish intelligence agent. Peggy was well aware of the power her money gave her, and she used it throughout her life, often cruelly, to bolster her low self-esteem. That's a quote from biographer Anton Gill. The bar associations are historically very closely linked to the big money banking and the corporate monopoly. Lawyers, judges, and government prosecutors tread very softly when that kind of power flexes their muscles. If Emma Goldman was the producer and director of the assassination of the president, as Zolgos very clearly stated, no prosecutor could bring Guggenheim, Rothschild, and Goldman into court if he liked being a member of the bar. The security people and the medical doctors of the assassination target become part of the operation. Sometimes they are informed that they or members of their family will be killed if they do not do exactly what they're told, and other times they're infiltration agents or just true believers in the globalist agenda. But this threat against some is not really like a threat, for they will kill them, and the killers will be not brought to court, as the killers are protected by the invisible money power. But the fall guy, he is not. Armed with the information that the protection agents and the doctors would willingly or unwillingly become involved in the political assassination of the president, what evidence do we have that this was the case in the William McKinley assassination? 2 Secret Service operatives were assigned to the president that day, Ireland and George Foster. I don't know the rest of Ireland's name. I find nothing about where Foster stood or what he did, or even his full name. Officer Ireland said he usually stands behind the president and to his left, where he could see people's hands as they approached. But on this day, someone asked him to move to a position where he could not see. Why did he agree to move? He should have said no. He did endanger the president by moving. Neither Ireland or George Foster ever touched the assassin until afterward. This seems strange. The security agent guarding the president, Mr. Ireland, Officer Ireland, offered this excuse. He said, well, we've been taking the president all kind of different places, and he was never assassinated before. This kind of excuse that the president hadn't been shot before is total nonsense. The two security agents deliberately got out of the way because ahead of time they knew bullets were going to be flying. And they didn't stand where they usually stand. They got themselves out of the way of the bullet. The assassin got off 2 shots and was trying to fire several more. A large, courageous Negro man named James Parker, God bless him. The next person in line behind hit the assassin a hard blow to the neck with one hand and grabbed the gun with the other hand. What courage that takes. The gun slid across the floor and was picked up and pocketed by an artilleryman. It should be interestingly noted that Ireland and George Foster, the security agents, had moved to safety out of line of fire before the shooting and never touched the assassin, although he had pushed a swarthy man to move him along. Had not the Negro man, Mr. James Parker, taken dangerous, heroic action, the president would have been shot several more times. Afterwards, George Foster did search Zolko's and struck him a blow when he looked at the president. Knowing the methods used by the globalists in assassinations, the behavior of the protection agents in the McKinley assassination fits a classic pattern we might expect. They stood back and let it happen. Were they paid off or scared off? Today, that would be very hard to prove in court. But to someone who understands how skull and bones assassinations are planned and executed, in the McKinley assassination, it does seem obvious. Phase 2. Deadly doctors, another classic pattern. The best surgeon in New York, Dr. Roswell Park, who just 2 weeks later would save the life of a woman who suffered injuries almost identical to McKinley's, was scrubbed up and ready to join in the presidential surgery, when the doctor suddenly ended the surgery without finding the bullet. These doctors had decided to perform the surgery in an ill-equipped, darkened room with the president, with a good heart rate of 84 beats per minute, could easily have been transported in an electric ambulance to nearby Buffalo General Hospital, where a much better operating room was available. McKinley had been shot just twice. The first bullet ricocheting off his breastbone and ending up in his jacket. The second penetrated his stomach and likely ended up in his back muscles, but it was never found. The surgery that was performed consisted of the abdomen being opened through the line of the bullet wound. Bullet penetration of the stomach, front, and back walls was closed with silk sutures. The sutures used to sew up the president's stomach, where the bullet had gone from the front to the back through his stomach, were poisoned. They were poisoned intentionally by the doctors. But it was what actually killed him. Not the bullets. The shooting didn't kill him. It was the poisoned sutures that were sewn into his stomach that caused gangrene, and the gangrene killed the president. The abdominal wound was closed without drainage. That means cleaning. No injury to intestines or other abdominal organs was discovered. Closing the surgery without drainage and cleaning the bullet wound helped to generate the gangrene that eventually killed McKinley. The doctors contaminated the wound intentionally. The statement that the president died of an infection does not reveal a medical source that actually murdered him. A bullet, once it stops, does no further damage, but gangrene slowly grows until it poisons the person and kills them. So the president quickly recovered from the gunshot wound, but gradually what the doctors had done in poisoning him with poison sutures, the gangrene finally took hold and was able to kill the president. And of course, then the globalist policies became a little different. So the president began to recover because the gangrene hadn't taken hold. But as soon as the gangrene took hold, it poisoned him and killed him. Infection and gangrene following surgery is something that you might take a note of, because that seems to be how doctor assassins work. At the Milburn house, McKinley seemed to be recovering on Saturday, September 7th. McKinley was relaxed and conversational. His wife was allowed to see him, as was Corteu, the president, that's his president's secretary. The president asked his secretary, "How did they like my speech?" and was pleased on hearing the positive reactions. So McKinley's doing well because the gangrene has not gotten to him yet. As the crisis seemed to pass, dignitaries started to leave on September 9th, confident the president would recover. Obviously, the bullet wound did not kill him. The doctors did. He was recovering from being shot, but that changed after the poison, the gangrene from the sutures, took hold. McKinley was given nutritive enemas. On September 11, he took some broth by mouth. When it seemed to do him good, the following morning he was allowed toast, coffee, and chicken broth. His subsequent pain was diagnosed as indigestion. He was given purgatives, and most doctors left after their evening consultation. It wasn't indigestion, it was gangrene. In the early morning of September 13th, McKinley suffered a collapse. The gangrene was growing on the walls of his stomach around the sutures, and toxins were passing into his bloodstream. McKinley drifted in and out of consciousness all day long. At 2:15 a.m. on Saturday, September 14th, 1901, President McKinley died. He had been poisoned by deadly and incorrect medical treatment. During these proceedings, the decision had been made as to who would be the head surgeon. When Matthew Mann entered the room a few minutes later, it was decided that he would be the man for the job. The only problem with Mann was the fact that he was a gynecologist and obstetrician. He knew how to deliver babies, and that's all. He was not an expert in surgery of the upper abdomen and had never operated on a gunshot wound. Quote, that's a quote. The autopsy was also performed by Matthew Mann, so if he murdered the president, he got a good chance to cover it up. The real power in Europe, even today, has rested in mega-rich family dynasties with titles of nobility. The model of the cabal is the Dutch and British East India Companies, but updated in form. If you study this information, you'll learn a lot about what's going on today. Monopolies controlled by bank loans and associated with the Bilderberger Group, the Black Pope militant Jesuit general, billionaire communists, and the ominous black nobility. The black nobility are called black, not because their skin is black, but because of their deadly ruthlessness and their admiration for their ancestor, Vlad the Impaler, the real Count Dracula. Their assassinations of U.S. presidents are rooted in several deep motives. One is revenge for taking away territory they control and colonize. The McKinley administration's American war with Spain cost the globalists Cuba, Puerto Rico, Guam, and the Philippines. Spanish-American War. Spain, even in this modern day, is a country ruled by a despotic royal house and a king. Seems silly to me. This marked President McKinley for assassination, as years earlier it had targeted President James Polk. See my video for that. The globalist power is derived from debt-based banking and corporate monopoly. McKinley, having long been an advocate of protective tariffs and believing the Engel tariff passed during his first year in office had helped the nation reach prosperity, McKinley planned to negotiate reciprocal trade agreements with other countries. This would open foreign markets to U.S. manufacturers that had dominated the domestic market thanks to the high tariffs, and who sought to expand into areas once exclusive to the European monopoly. So McKinley, with high tariffs, protected businesses that became successful in the United States and were ready to expand into territory controlled by Europe. Rapid economic growth marked McKinley's presidency. McKinley's tariffs gave a price advantage to the domestic market over foreign competitors. The globalists would assassinate him, and this would change for them. That is what they thought. The McKinley administration was one of great prosperity. He did great things for America. That's why the globalists felt that if they could assassinate him and get rid of him, then they could take over the banking cartel and bring in the Federal Reserve and turn America into a bunch of peasants. And that's what they did. And they thought by assassinating the President of the United States that their policies then would get control and they could begin to plunder the United States, as does the Federal Reserve System today. And anytime anyone, even senators and congressmen, try to represent the American people and try to fix the problem with the monetary system and try to advocate against the globalist control of our economy, anytime any leader does that, then they are assassinated. When McKinley took office, the nation suffered under the Panic of 1838. It was caused by the manipulation of the volume of gold coins in circulation, carried off by wealthy robber barons glutted with large gold holdings and mines. The president began to amass a large stockpile of gold for the U.S. government and brought prosperity back to the American people. In 1900, he had secured the passage of the Gold Standard Act, and before the end of 1901, he was killed. McKinley's administration was framed for the people, as a defense to their industries, as a protection to their labor, the labor of their hands, and as a safeguard to happy homes of American working men, and as a security to their education, their wages, and their investment. It will bring to this country a prosperity unparalleled in our own history, unrivaled in the history of the world. The statement from an encyclopedia. This, of course, is not the agenda of the globalists. So they killed this president. Now, there's a book out there that you might find very interesting. It's called The Invisible College. It was written by William Stewart. And it traces the banking cartel from 700 AD and how they invaded with financial tricks up until when they took over the British royal families and the British governments and also all of Europe. They took over the whole European peerage and turned it into their own particular form of conspiracy. Even the Revolutionary War was probably not fought against the British people at all. It was fought against a banking cartel that wanted the colonies to use their money instead of colonial dollars. I use my observation, my intuition, and my opinion to report to you that 9 presidents were assassinated by the globalists. Because when they attempted to represent the people and the interests of the nation, that was in opposition to what the globalists wanted. So the globalists would assassinate the president. There were 9 presidents assassinated, 5 by poison, 4 were shot. We know more about those, but the person that shot him wasn't a lone nut, as they claim, because each of these persons has ties to the banking cartel. 4 other presidents there was an attempt on their lives, and they were usually compromised and turned by those attempts. There were also many others who were candidates for the presidency, military officers, and other people, congressmen and senators, who were also murdered because they opposed the globalists. Even Lindbergh's baby child. So that's how they got the Federal Reserve. Let's review. Lincoln, Benjamin Harrison, James Garfield, President McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt was shot, Warren G. Harding was poisoned, and Calvin Coolidge's son was murdered with poison. So that's how we got the Federal Reserve. If I'm not censored by the Jewish community, I'll see you next time.